Well, welcome everybody. This is John Palmer, Dr. Dr. This is Raging Verbalist number 264. This has been a long time in coming. This is actually a tribute to my father in his last days. I shared with you several months ago his basically his 100th year birthday. I thought it would be important that we talk or share with you, what happened during his last days. This was scheduled to be on January 10th, 2025, but a couple things happened. First off, we had wildfires in Southern California. Still have fires, but not like it was before. And because of that, they started turning off power all over the place. Um, and it's a frustrating thing. So power was out for 58 hours and change, almost 59 hours, which really created a real problem. My wife has health issues, so having to deal with all of that, not really as prepared as we wanted to be. So that happened, and then the next time I want to do it, well, we had other problems, and brought her home from surgery, and the power was out. So anyway, we're gonna do it today, and it's really important to me. Hopefully, you'll take this story and learn some things from it, and all that. So let's keep rolling it along. So years ago, I was a very big fan of going to Mac Expo in San Francisco. I would make this a kind of a ritual. I would go up to the Bay Area and spend a couple days and see what was going on. And it was great. Got to meet a lot of people, and it was one of those things that this was still when it was happening. I always thought it was a great show, and whether you were a Mac person or not, well, you need to be probably a Mac person, but you got to meet all these people. So I was on my way to going to the Mac Expo, bought my tickets, had everything all set up, was all arranged. And something happened, which was I knew my father was in the hospital. And what had happened is that he had gone in for testing during the holidays. Macworld, for those of you who didn't know this, that event was always held in early January. It almost coincided with Consumer Electronics Show. I think that was a little bit of a stab in the eye from Steve Jobs to the CES people, but that's what happened. And because of that, I already had made my reservations. My father had come down with an illness, was in the hospital, and I said, okay, what I'll do is I'll go to Macworld. I'll only go there for a day and a half max, and then I'll fly on to Denver and I'll see him, and everything will be fine. Well, it seemed like everything was going to be great until the phone rang on Saturday, and it was my brother. That wasn't the uniqueness, but he was standing there with my father's doctor, and she got on the phone and she said, "Listen, if you want to see him alive, you will get here ASAP." I explained to her that I was going to be there on Monday or Tuesday, and she said, "Nope, you better get yourself here sooner than that." And I understood at that point in time. And if you ever get a phone call like that, it's like it's a shock, it's a slap in the face, and immediately changed my plans. And obviously not going to make it to Mac Expo. Well, there are more important things than going to a show. So I put that together and got the trip all set up, and flew to Denver, and got there just in really in the nick of time. But that's really kind of where our story goes. And as I arrived, I drove right to the hospital, and my brother was there, and he said, well, he's not looking good. He's got some problems, and all of that. And it became clear because what had happened is that he had this infection, this kind of this cough. He was a kidney transplant recipient, and whenever he had any kind of elevated temperature, any kind of problems, right away we had to get him in. And luckily my brother wouldn't let my father say, "Well, I'll do it after the holidays." And they brought him into the hospital, and they gave him some tests, and they were about ready to send him home, and they gave him a final breathing test, and he failed by 1/2 of 1 point. And he said, well, we're going to have to do a little bit more. And when they did a scan on him, they found several lumps or several blotches on the thing, which were lumps in his lungs, and said, wow, that doesn't look good. And they kept him. And of course, we knew that. And then they removed some fluid from his lungs, and that's where we're at. I go into the room and he's there and he looks really, really bad. He doesn't recognize us that much, but he does recognize us somewhat. He's in a lot of pain. And he looks at my brother and I, and the last thing he ever said was, they won't do it. We said, what do you mean? Well, they won't do it. So what I need you to do is go get my knife and I'm going to end it right here. Now I know that sounds bizarre and strange, but you didn't know my father. I mean, he was a, if you're not going to take care of it, I will do kind of thing. And we said, well, we're not going to be able to really do that. But I really understood how close we were to the end and how insane the situation, well, not insane, but how just dire the situation was. So we go out and we talk to the doctor, and the doctor says, look, he is not going to make it, or he can make it, but probably not. By the way, because he bumped his head, we did a brain scan. Let me show you what that looks like. And there was, again, signs of growths in his brain. They then scanned his rest of his body. They found more in his liver, and that was that. My sister had come from Tucson, and we ended up having to make the toughest decision that, frankly, you're ever going to make, or I was ever going to make, which is, should we cut off the life support? Should we really plan on that? This is going to be the final. Uh, tough decision to make, but we made it, and we said, okay. We agreed that we'd pull life support, and we were going to move forward with that. Now that all happened within like 2 days, so now we're on Sunday sometime, and it's not easy because you know that the decision that you just made is going to, in all likelihood, without question, end his life. Now, one can believe in faith, one can believe in God, one can believe in whatever, but the science of it is that it looked like he had some serious problems going on. The test came back from the fluid in his lungs, was a positive indicator for cancer, though that test itself had a high, uh, false positive type thing, but it was still an indicator. And so we just had to prepare ourselves for what was going to happen. Now, we're hanging out at the VA hospital. I have to say that they took great care of him. However, since he wasn't going to go like right now and where he was at, they started talking about, well, maybe we had to move him to hospice care. And I'm like, well, he is not going to make it that long to go to, and first off, the transportation would kill him. So had to fight the bureaucracy somewhat. And then we had to go start dealing with all of the situation, all the rules that were there. First one was that since he was in tremendous pain, he kept asking for morphine or painkillers, which was morphine. They were reluctant to give it to him any more than the rigorous or the rigid schedule they had, for fear that he might become addicted. And it's like, well, if he becomes addicted in the last few days, it doesn't really matter. I understand everybody's got to have rules, but we had to work our way around it. The most ironic thing is that he was now living on popsicles of all things. And yeah, you heard it right, popsicles. Now, the VA had a strict rule of how many popsicles each patient could get a day, some kind of restriction of that. So I went out and bought a big giant box of popsicles. I mean, the biggest box I could buy. And they were, they had to put a label on it that it was just for him. And he was living on popsicles and morphine, and that's kind of like where he was going. Now that gets us to really the last day. Now, lots of friends of the family, friends of my father, everybody was coming through, and the interesting thing about it is, of course, is that he was coming in and out and in and out of coherence, and we get to what would be his last day. And his last day was quite astonishing in some ways, kind of matched up to the life that he lived, because he lived a very full life. He did a lot of things. He survived being in the South Pacific in World War II and got 11 combat stars, went blind temporarily while he was in the Navy. He was on his 21st birthday was when the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. I mean, it's quite a heroic, or not, it's kind of heroic journey, I guess you would say. So the last day started off by getting there. We got there to the hospital early in the morning, and here was my best friend's father, General Mortimer Gordon. Morty was there. They had a interesting relationship, the two of them. You know, the general and the the seaman. And Morty was sitting there telling them stories about New York City. And here he was sitting up, and Morty says, "Well, what do you want me to do?" I said, "Just tell them stories about New York." And so Morty was telling these great stories about New York City, the Lower East Side, what it was like, the delis and eating and all that. And my father was perked up about that. He started responding to that. So clearly there was pieces of him still there and still alive. And then everybody was there, we kept feeding him popsicles and keeping him going. Eventually, my brother's there, my sister, my niece, my grandniece, my sister's husband Bob, and you know my niece Patty's significant other Jeff, and we're all there, and we then are ready for that final. Now, if you've never gone through this, my suggestion is that we had a great last day. And because of that, it meant that when we had to let go at the very end, it was not as bad as it could have been. It was a closure, if you will. So we're sitting there, and they say, well, he doesn't look like he's in good shape. By the way, the cancer specialist shows up and says, by the way, I'm working on a plan of what to do to attack his cancer. I explained to him, we explained to him that we had already removed life support, which he was shocked. I said, look, he's got a transplanted kidney. The immune suppressant drugs that he's been given to make that kidney not die has probably made him vulnerable to what is now taking place. And it just doesn't look right. He was a little astonished that we would do that, because most people want to elongate it, go months and months and months, hang on to, this person for as long as you can. But, I don't, my father didn't want to do that. Again, his last words were, hand me my knife and I'll, get me my knife and I'll take care of this. So we started doing what I think was the most appropriate thing. We started telling stories. We started telling jokes. Jeff, who is Patty's other, tells great jokes, and he and my father had just spent a Thanksgiving, because my father went to Tucson and had gone to Tucson, and he and Jeff went back and forth and back and forth. So Jeff was telling jokes, and we started singing songs, and we did all of those things. And every once in a while, the reality hit, and we get to that lull in that conversation, and the reality hit that this was going to be it. Not an easy point in time. However, every time we thought it was time for him to go, he would start to drift off. It would get very quiet. Is he still breathing? However, because he had an incredible iron constitution and a pacemaker, because that whenever he was like gonna go, the pacemaker would kick in and bang, it would revive him. And so we said, well, we gotta figure this out. So we went and got the doctor and explained what was going on, and said, the pacemaker, I mean, we don't need to have the equipment tell us. I mean, you can just see that change. And we made the decision to have his pacemaker turned off. The guy who turned off the pacemaker was very reticent and concerned. He said, listen, if you turn off the pacemaker, I don't want to be here when the guy dies. I mean, that isn't what I'm all about. But, so we had to go and kind of negotiate that. Oh, hey, that's kind of an oddball negotiation for me in the career that I've had, which is to negotiate to turn off the pacemaker. Finally convinced him of how to do that. And we said, look, when you do this, he is not going to just go out like a light. He is going to hang in there. Turn off the pacemaker, and sure enough, he didn't go out as like a light. The guy left, and we continued on our. Well, nobody planned any of this, but we kept up our spirits. We tried to keep up his spirits. We tried to, if you will, honor the life that he had with, my mother and all of us, and the things that he had done, and do all of that. Sadly, that wasn't going to last forever, of course, because what happened is that at 6:13:33 exactly, because I was looking at my watch, PM. He passed on January 10th, 2006. When he did, he was 81 years old, 5 months and 5 days, and had lived an extraordinary life. And of course, I would not be here today if he had not been there. So that is my tribute. And I made it farther than I thought I would before it got to this kind of emotional state. But hopefully, what this has done for you is that if your mother, father, whoever significant is alive, reach out, do something, and make sure that you honor not only the last day, but every day of their life. I'm John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Specelli, and this has been the Raging Verbalist, number 264. Until next week, be well.